Sarah Martinez had always been the quiet one at Riverside shooting range. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, she would arrive exactly at 3 p.m., carrying her worn leather gun case and wearing the same faded black hoodie. The other regulars barely noticed her anymore. She kept to herself, choosing the furthest lane from everyone else, and never spoke unless absolutely necessary. The range employees knew her as the woman who paid in cash, shot with deadly precision, and left without saying goodbye. Her targets always came back looking like Swiss cheese, with bullet holes clustered so tightly in the center that you could cover them with a silver dollar. Even the most experienced shooters would glance over with a mixture of respect and curiosity, wondering where a quiet woman in her 30s had learned to shoot like a professional soldier. Sarah preferred it this way. The less attention she drew, the better. She had spent the last 5 years building a careful, invisible life in this small Colorado town. She worked nights as a security guard at a warehouse, lived alone in a modest apartment above the local bakery, and had no social media presence. To everyone around her, she was just another resident trying to make ends meet. But beneath that oversized hoodie, hidden from the world, was a story that could change everything. On her left shoulder blade, covered by fabric and secrets, was a tattoo that told a different tale. It was a simple design that most people would overlook, a pair of dog tags with specific numbers and a date. But to those who knew how to read military markings, it told the story of Sergeant Sarah Martinez, United States Army, officially declared killed in action 3 years ago during a mission in Afghanistan. The real Sarah Martinez had been part of an elite intelligence unit specializing in deep cover operations in hostile territory. She had spent months embedded with local populations, gathering crucial information about terrorist networks. Her work had saved countless lives and disrupted major planned attacks, but during her final mission, everything went wrong. The convoy. She was traveling with an improvised explosive device on a remote mountain road. The explosion was massive, destroying 2 vehicles completely and leaving no survivors according to the official report. Sarah's commanding officers received confirmation of her death from local sources, and her family received a folded flag and a medal for her service. There was even a funeral, complete with military honors and a headstone in Arlington National Cemetery. What the military didn't know was that Sarah had survived the blast. Badly injured and with no way to contact her unit, she had been found by a group of local villagers who had no love for either the American military or the Taliban. They nursed her back to health over several months, and when she was strong enough to travel, they helped her disappear completely. Sarah made a difficult choice. She could try to return to her unit and resume her military life, but she knew that her cover had been blown. The people who had tried to kill her would try again, and next time, they might succeed. More importantly, she had learned during her recovery that there was a mole in her unit, someone who had sold information about her mission to the enemy. So she became a ghost, using skills learned during years of covert operations to create a new identity and start over. She chose Colorado because it was far from her old life in Texas, and because the mountains reminded her of Afghanistan in a strange way. She thought she could live quietly here forever, keeping her secrets buried along with her past. The shooting range had become her therapy. The familiar weight of a weapon in her hands, the steady rhythm of breathing and aiming, the satisfaction of hitting her target perfectly every time. It was the only connection she maintained to her former self. It was also practical training. Even though she had left her old life behind, Sarah knew that the people who had tried to kill her might someday find her. As she packed up her equipment that Thursday afternoon, Sarah noticed a new face at the range. A tall man with short gray hair and the unmistakable bearing of a career military officer was talking to the range master. He wore civilian clothes, but everything about his posture and the way he scanned the room screamed Special Forces. Sarah felt a familiar chill run down her spine. She had gotten too comfortable, too routine in her visits here. Professional soldiers were trained to notice patterns, and she had been creating the same pattern for months. She decided this would be her last visit to Riverside Shooting Range. It was time to find a new place to practice, maybe even time to consider moving to a different town altogether. She was almost to the exit when she heard footsteps behind her. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward the concealed pistol at her waist, a habit that 5 years of civilian life hadn't been able to break. She turned slowly, expecting to see the gray-haired man, but instead found herself face to face with Jake Thompson, one of the regular shooters who had always been friendly but respectful of her privacy. "Hey, Sarah," Jake said with his usual easy smile. "I was wondering if you might want to grab coffee sometime. There's this new place downtown that just opened, and I thought maybe—" His words trailed off as he noticed her expression. Sarah realized she was staring at him with the cold, calculating look she used to reserve for potential threats in hostile territory. She forced herself to relax and managed a small smile. "That's very kind, Jake, but I'm not really looking to date anyone right now." Jake nodded understandingly, but before he could respond, the gray-haired man appeared beside them. "Excuse me," he said in a voice that carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I couldn't help but notice your shooting today. That's some impressive accuracy you've got there." Sarah felt every muscle in her body tense. This was exactly the kind of attention she had spent 5 years trying to avoid. Commander Michael "Hawk" Harrison had spent 25 years in the Navy SEALs, and he could spot a trained operator from a mile away. The woman in the black hoodie moved with the controlled precision that came from years of military training, and her shooting was better than most of his current team members. What really caught his attention, though, was the way she positioned herself in the range, always with clear sightlines to the exits, always aware of everyone around her, always ready to react to threats that probably didn't exist in a small Colorado town. "Thank you," Sarah replied carefully, keeping her voice neutral. "I've had some training." Hawk smiled, but his eyes remained sharp and calculating. "I can tell. Mind me asking where you served?" The question hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Jake looked confused, glancing between the two of them as if he had stumbled into a conversation he couldn't understand. Sarah felt her heart racing, but she kept her expression calm. This was the moment she had been dreading for 5 years. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she said evenly. "I work security at the Morrison warehouse. Never been in the military." Hawk nodded slowly, but Sarah could see that he wasn't buying it. He had the same look in his eyes that she used to get when she was interrogating suspected insurgents in Afghanistan, polite on the surface, but probing for weaknesses underneath. "My mistake," he said finally. "It's just that you shoot exactly like this soldier I knew once. Sergeant Sarah Martinez. Hell of an operator. Lost her in Afghanistan a few years back." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "Funny thing is, you could be her twin sister." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact. "I'm sorry for your loss, but like I said, I think you have me confused with someone else." Jake was looking increasingly uncomfortable with the tension in the air. "Well, I should probably get going," he said awkwardly. "Sarah, let me know if you change your mind about that coffee." He hurried away, clearly eager to escape whatever was happening between Sarah and the gray-haired stranger. Hawk waited until Jake was out of earshot before speaking again. "You know, the thing about Sergeant Martinez is that she was officially declared dead, but her body was never recovered. Sometimes in our line of work, that creates opportunities for new beginnings." Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward her concealed weapon, and Hawk noticed the movement immediately. His own posture shifted slightly, not threateningly, but with the ready stance of someone prepared for action. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quietly. "But I am here for a reason. There are some people who need to know that Sergeant Martinez might still be alive." "Even if your friend did survive," Sarah said carefully, "maybe she had good reasons for staying dead. Maybe she's built a new life and doesn't want to be found." Hawk's expression softened slightly. "Maybe. But there are also some people who died because they thought she was already dead. People who could have been saved if they had known the truth." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had always wondered about her unit, about the people she had left behind when she chose to disappear. She had told herself that they were better off thinking she was dead, that her presence would only put them in danger. But what if she had been wrong? "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Hawk reached slowly into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph. It showed a group of soldiers in desert camouflage, standing in front of an armored vehicle. Sarah recognized it immediately. It was her old unit, taken just weeks before the convoy attack that had supposedly killed her. "These people trusted Sergeant Martinez with their lives," Hawk said quietly, "and she trusted them with hers. But 3 months after she was declared dead, someone leaked classified information about ongoing operations in her area. Good soldiers died because of that leak." Sarah stared at the photograph, her mind racing. She recognized every face in the picture, remembered their names, their stories, their families back home. The thought that some of them might be dead because she wasn't there to prevent it was almost unbearable. "Even if she was alive," Sarah said slowly, "how would that help now? The damage is done." "Because the leak is still happening," Hawk replied. "Someone in that unit is still selling information to the enemy. Someone who thinks Sergeant Martinez can never come back to identify them." Sarah felt a chill run through her entire body. She had suspected there was a mole in her unit, but she had assumed that person would lay low after her supposed death. The idea that they were still active, still getting people killed, changed everything. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Hawk studied her face for a long moment before answering. "Because I think you already know why. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Sarah looked around the shooting range, at the normal people living their normal lives, completely unaware that they were standing next to someone who was supposed to be dead. For 5 years she had convinced herself that this quiet existence was enough, that she had earned the right to disappear and start over. But the photograph in Hawk's hand told a different story. It showed people she had loved, people she had fought beside, people who had counted on her to have their backs. If some of them were dead because she hadn't been there to protect them, then her peaceful new life was built on a foundation of blood. "I need to think about this," she said finally. Hawk nodded and handed her a business card. It was plain white, with only a phone number printed in black ink. "When you're ready to talk, call that number, but don't wait too long. Every day that passes, more good soldiers are at risk." He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at her. "One more thing. That tattoo on your shoulder, the one with the dog tags and the date, you might want to be more careful about who sees it. Not everyone who recognizes it will be as friendly as I am." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She had been so careful to keep the tattoo hidden, always wearing long sleeves or hoodies that covered it completely. But at some point, without realizing it, she must have exposed it. Maybe when she was changing her shooting position or when she was packing up her equipment. The thought that she had been walking around for months with her secret visible to anyone who knew what to look for was terrifying. As Hawk walked away, Sarah realized that her careful, quiet life in Colorado was over. Whether she called the number on his card or not, there was no going back to the way things were. Too many people knew too much, and the past she had worked so hard to bury was clawing its way back to the surface. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat in her small apartment, staring at the plain white business card that Hawk had given her, turning it over and over in her hands. The single phone number seemed to mock her, representing everything she had tried to leave behind and everything she might need to face. By morning, she had made a decision that she knew would change everything. She called in sick to work, something she had never done in 5 years of employment at the warehouse. Then she drove to a truck stop outside of town and used a payphone to call the number on the card. Hawk answered on the first ring. "I was hoping you'd call. We need to meet," Sarah said without identifying herself. "Somewhere private. There's an old mining cabin about 20 miles north of town, up Canyon Creek Road. You'll see a rusted mailbox with the number 47 on it. Be there at noon." Sarah arrived at the cabin 15 minutes early, her old habits of reconnaissance and preparation taking over automatically. The building was exactly what Hawk had described, an abandoned miner's shack from the 1800s, weathered but still standing. More importantly, it was completely isolated, with clear sightlines in all directions and multiple escape routes if things went wrong. Hawk was already there, sitting on the cabin's front porch like he had been waiting for hours. He had traded, his civilian clothes for military fatigues, and Sarah could see the outline of a sidearm under his jacket. When he saw her approaching, he stood up with the fluid motion of someone half his age. "Sergeant Martinez," he said formally. "It's good to finally meet you officially." Sarah stopped about 10 feet away from him, close enough to talk but far enough to react if this turned out to be a trap. "How long have you known?" "I suspected it the moment I saw you shoot," Hawk replied. "But I wasn't certain until I saw your reaction when I mentioned your unit. You've got a good poker face, but not when it comes to your people." "My people are dead," Sarah said quietly. "I attended their funerals, at least the ones whose bodies they found." Hawk pulled out a computer, and showed her the screen. It displayed a list of names, some crossed out in red, others highlighted in green. Sarah recognized them immediately. They were the members of her old intelligence unit. "Red means confirmed dead," Hawk explained. "Green means still alive and active. As you can see, you weren't the only survivor." Sarah stared at the list, her heart pounding. 7 names were highlighted in green, including some people she had been certain were dead. But 9 names were crossed out in red, people who had died in the 3 years since she had disappeared. "How?" she whispered. "The convoy attack was meant to kill everyone, but the explosive device malfunctioned. It should have been much bigger. You weren't the only one who survived, but you were the only one who chose to stay dead." Hawk swiped to a new screen showing after-action reports and intelligence summaries. "The others who survived formed a new unit, but they've been compromised from the beginning. Someone has been feeding information to the enemy about their operations, their locations, their mission parameters. Good soldiers have died because of it." Sarah felt sick. The idea that her friends and former teammates had been struggling and dying while she was living peacefully in Colorado was almost unbearable. But there was something else bothering her, something that didn't make sense. "Why hasn't the mole been caught?" she asked. "These people are trained intelligence operatives. They should be able to identify a traitor in their own ranks." Hawk's expression grew grim. "Because the mole isn't just anyone. Based on the level of information being leaked, it has to be someone with command-level access, someone that the others trust completely." "You think it's their commanding officer?" "I think it's worse than that," Hawk replied. "I think it's someone who was supposed to have died in that original convoy attack. Someone whose survival would be just as shocking as yours." The implications of what he was saying hit Sarah like a sledgehammer. If another member of her unit had also survived and chosen to fake their death, they would have had the perfect cover to sell information to the enemy. Everyone would assume they were dead, so no one would suspect them of being the leak. "Do you have any proof?" Sarah asked. Hawk showed her another screen filled with communication intercepts and intelligence reports. 3 weeks ago, we intercepted communications between a known terrorist cell and someone they referred to as the Ghost. This person provided detailed information about a planned raid that resulted in the deaths of 4 American soldiers. Sarah studied the intercepts, her trained mind automatically analyzing the intelligence patterns and communication protocols. Something about the language used in the messages seemed familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. "The thing is," Hawk continued, "the information that was leaked could only have come from someone who was present at the original mission briefing for your unit. Someone who knew the long-term strategic objectives, not just the immediate tactical plans." "That could be any surviving member of the unit," Sarah pointed out. "True, but there's more." Hawk swiped to a photograph showing a man in civilian clothes meeting with 2 individuals who were clearly Middle Eastern. The image was grainy and taken from a distance, but Sarah could make out enough details to see that the man appeared to be American, probably in his 30s with dark hair and an athletic build. This photograph was taken in Istanbul 6 months ago. Our sources identified the 2 men as facilitators for a terrorist network operating in Afghanistan, but we couldn't identify the American they were meeting with. Sarah leaned closer to study the photograph. There was something about the man's posture, the way he held his shoulders, that seemed familiar, but the image was too unclear to make a definitive identification. "Here's where it gets interesting," Hawk said. "We ran facial recognition software on this image and we got a match. The problem is the match was to someone who is officially dead. Sarah's blood ran cold. Someone from my unit? Lieutenant Marcus Cole, your former team leader. Officially, killed in the same convoy attack that supposedly killed you. Sarah stared at the photograph with new eyes, and suddenly the familiar posture made sense. Marcus had always stood with his left shoulder slightly higher than his right, a result of an old parachuting accident. She could see that same distinctive stance in the grainy surveillance photo. Marcus, she whispered. The man who had trained, her who had trusted her with the most dangerous missions, who had held her while she cried after her first kill, the man she had looked up to as both a mentor and a friend. We think he's been playing both sides since the convoy attack, Hawk explained, selling information to terrorist networks while maintaining contact with the surviving members of your unit. It's the perfect setup. He gets intelligence from his former teammates, sells it to the enemy, and no one suspects him because he's supposed to be dead. Sarah felt a mixture of betrayal and rage that she hadn't experienced since her military days. Marcus had been more than just her commanding officer. He had been someone she trusted with her life. The idea that he had been responsible for the deaths of their mutual friends was almost impossible to process. "What do you want me to do?" she asked finally. Hawk closed the tablet and looked her directly in the eyes. "We want you to come back. From the dead, Sergeant. We want you to help us catch the son of a bitch who's been getting your people killed." The plan that Hawk outlined was both brilliant and terrifying. Sarah would officially resurface by contacting her surviving unit members, claiming that she had been recovering from severe injuries and amnesia for the past 3 years. This would force Marcus Cole, if he was indeed the mole, to either abandon his double agent operation or try to eliminate Sarah before she could expose him. "It's basically using you as bait," Hawk admitted, as they sat in the cabin going over the details. "But it's the only way to flush him out. If Marcus is working with the enemy, he'll know that your return could expose him. He'll have to act." Sarah studied the mission parameters that Hawk had laid out on the table between them. It felt strange to be looking at tactical planning documents, again after 5 years of civilian life, but the old skills came back quickly. "What about backup? If Marcus decides to eliminate me, I'll need support." "We'll have a full team in position," Hawk assured her. "But it has to look natural. If he suspects it's a trap, he'll disappear and we'll never catch him." The first phase of the operation began 2 days later. Sarah, using secure communication protocols that she hadn't touched in years, sent a coded message to Staff Sergeant James Rodriguez, one of her surviving teammates. The message was simple. "The Eagle has landed. Nest coordinates follow." Rodriguez's response came back within an hour, and Sarah could practically feel his shock through the encrypted text. Eagle was confirmed KIA. Request verification of identity. Sarah smiled grimly as she typed her response. She provided details that only the real Sarah Martinez would know. The name of Rodriguez's daughter, the location of a hidden supply cache they had established together, and the exact words he had said to her on the night before the convoy attack. The verification process continued for several hours, with Rodriguez asking increasingly specific questions that proved beyond doubt that Sarah was alive and had retained her memories of their shared experiences. Finally, he sent coordinates for a meeting location and a time, tomorrow at midnight. The reunion with her surviving teammates was both emotional and heartbreaking. Rodriguez had aged visibly in the 3 years since she had seen him, with new scars on his face and a haunted look in his eyes that she recognized from her own mirror. Corporal Lisa Chen had lost her left arm below the elbow and now wore a high-tech prosthetic that she operated with unconscious skill. Master Sergeant David Park walked with a slight limp that suggested significant damage to his right leg. But they were alive, and seeing them again reminded Sarah of why she had loved military life despite its dangers. These people had been more than her teammates. They had been her family. "We thought you were dead," Rodriguez said quietly as they sat around a campfire in the remote location he had chosen for their meeting. "We held a memorial service for you." Chen cried for 3 days. "I did not cry for 3 days," Chen protested, but her voice was thick with emotion. "It was only 2 days. Sarah told them an edited version of the truth, that she had survived the convoy attack but had been severely injured and suffered from amnesia. She claimed that her memories had only recently returned, along with her ability to function normally. It was a believable story that explained her 3-year absence without revealing her deliberate choice to disappear. "The important thing is that you're back," Park said. "We could use your help. Things have been difficult since the attack." Over the next several hours, her teammates filled her in on what had happened in her absence. The surviving members of their unit had been reformed into a new intelligence team, but they had suffered heavy losses due to compromised missions and leaked information. "Someone has been selling us out," Rodriguez explained. "Every major operation we plan seems to get back to the enemy ahead of time. We've lost good people because of it." Sarah listened carefully, asking questions and gathering information while watching for any sign that one of her teammates might be the mole. But their anger and frustration seemed genuine, and their grief for their fallen comrades appeared real. "Have you considered that the leak might be coming from outside your immediate team?" Sarah asked carefully. "Maybe someone in command or in intelligence analysis?" "We've thought about everything," Chen replied. "But the level of detail that's being leaked suggests someone with intimate knowledge of our operations. Someone who knows not just what we're planning to do, but how we think, how we operate." "Someone like Marcus," Park said quietly. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. "Marcus? But he's dead. We all saw the casualty report." Rodriguez shook his head grimly. "That's what we thought. But 3 months ago, I could have sworn I saw him at a marketplace in Kandahar. Just for a second, in a crowd. But when I looked again, he was gone." "You think Marcus survived too?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "I don't know what to think anymore," Rodriguez admitted. "But if he is alive, why hasn't he contacted us? Why let us think he's dead?" Sarah spent the rest of the night with her former teammates, catching up on 3 years of separation and slowly rebuilding the bonds that had once made them an effective unit. But underneath the reunion, she was constantly analyzing everything they said, looking for clues that might help her identify Marcus Cole's current location and activities. The breakthrough came near dawn, when Chen mentioned something that made Sarah's blood run cold. "We got word last week that there might be a new operation targeting a terrorist training camp in the mountains near the Pakistani border," Chen said casually. The intelligence looked solid, but Rodriguez wanted to wait for additional confirmation before we moved on it. "Smart move," Park agreed, "given our recent track record with compromised operations." But Sarah was no longer paying attention to their conversation. She was thinking about the intercepted communications that Hawk had shown her, the ones where someone called the Ghost had provided information to terrorist networks. If Marcus was indeed working as a double agent, and if Sarah's return from the dead was forcing him to accelerate his timeline, then he might try to eliminate her entire former unit in one operation. A fake mission to attack a terrorist training camp would be the perfect trap. Marcus could provide the intelligence to make it look legitimate, then ensure that her team walked into an ambush that would kill them all. It would eliminate the threat of Sarah's return, while also removing the other witnesses who might eventually connect him to the intelligence leaks. "This new operation," Sarah said carefully. "When is it supposed to happen?" "Tomorrow night," Rodriguez replied. "Why?" Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. If she was right about Marcus's plan, then she had less than 24 hours to save her teammates' lives and expose the man who had been betraying them all along. But first, she needed to contact Hawk and get his backup team into position. Because if Marcus Cole was planning to eliminate her entire unit tomorrow night, then the trap was about to be sprung, and Sarah wasn't sure who the real prey was supposed to be. Sarah's suspicions proved correct in the worst possible way. When she contacted Hawk using the secure communication protocol they had established, he confirmed that intelligence intercepts from the past 24 hours had detected increased chatter among known terrorist networks about an impending operation against American forces. "They're expecting your team," Hawk told her during their encrypted phone conversation. "Someone has definitely leaked the mission details." "It has to be Marcus," Sarah replied, speaking from a secure location miles away from her teammate's current position. "The timing is too perfect. I resurface after 3 years, and suddenly there's a mission that could eliminate everyone who might recognize him." "We're moving our backup team into position now," Hawk assured her. "But you need to be careful. If Marcus is planning to eliminate your entire unit, He might try to take you out separately first. Sarah had been thinking the same thing. If Marcus was indeed the mole, then he would know that Sarah's return posed the greatest threat to his operation. She had been his student, had worked closely with him for years, and would be most likely to notice inconsistencies in his behavior or recognize his operational patterns. That evening, as her teammates prepared for what they believed was a legitimate mission against a terrorist training camp, Sarah received an unexpected message through one of the old communication channels her unit had used. The message was brief and unsigned, but she recognized the code format immediately. Phoenix requires immediate extraction. Compromised position. Meet at original coordinates. Come alone. Phoenix had been Marcus Cole's operational code name. The original coordinates referred to a location that only members of their original unit would know, a backup rendezvous point they had established during their first deployment together. Sarah stared at the message, her mind racing. Either Marcus was genuinely in trouble and reaching out for help, or this was exactly the trap she had been expecting. Sarah made a decision that went against every tactical principle she had ever learned. She decided to meet Marcus alone, without backup, without her teammates' knowledge, and without informing Hawk of her plans. It was incredibly dangerous, but it was also the only way to get definitive proof of Marcus's guilt or innocence. The coordinates led her to an abandoned building complex about 30 miles from where her teammates were preparing for their mission. It was a perfect location for either a reunion or an ambush. Isolated, with multiple levels and hiding places, and far enough from civilization that gunshots wouldn't be heard. Sarah arrived 2 hours early and spent the time conducting reconnaissance of the entire area. She identified 3 possible sniper positions, 2 likely ambush locations, and 4 different escape routes. More importantly, she confirmed that she was alone. No other vehicles had approached the site, and thermal imaging through her scope showed no heat signatures in the surrounding buildings. Marcus appeared exactly on time, emerging from the main building with his hands visible and his weapon holstered. Even at a distance, Sarah could see that he looked different, thinner, older, with the kind of weathered appearance that came from years of living under constant stress. But his posture and movement patterns were unmistakably the same. "Sarah," he called out when he spotted her position. "Thank God you're alive, we need to talk." Sarah kept her rifle trained on him as she approached, maintaining tactical spacing and staying alert for signs of deception. When she was close enough to see his face clearly, she was shocked by what she observed. Marcus looked genuinely relieved to see her, but there was also something else in his eyes: fear, desperation, and what appeared to be genuine guilt. "Marcus," she said carefully, not lowering her weapon, "you're supposed to be dead." "So are you," he replied. "But I'm guessing you had the same reasons I did for staying that way." "Which were?" Marcus's expression grew grim. "Someone in our unit was working for the other side. Someone set up that convoy attack, Sarah. It wasn't random. We were betrayed by one of our own." Sarah felt her carefully constructed assumptions beginning to crumble. If Marcus was telling the truth, then everything Hawk had told her about the intelligence leaks and the surveillance photographs might be wrong. But she had seen the evidence with her own eyes. "If that's true," she said slowly, "then why have you been living under a false identity for 3 years? Why not come forward and help investigate?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "Because the person who betrayed us is still out there, still active, and still trying to kill anyone who might expose them. I've been investigating on my own, trying to gather enough evidence to prove what really happened. And what did you find?" "The mole isn't someone from our unit," Marcus said quietly. "It's someone much higher up the chain of command. Someone who had access to our mission planning from the very beginning." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as Marcus continued his explanation. According to him, the intelligence leaks had been coming from a senior officer in their chain of command, someone who had been selling information to terrorist networks for years. The convoy attack had been arranged specifically to eliminate Sarah's unit, because they had gotten too close to uncovering the truth. "I've been tracking the bastard for 3 years, Marcus explained. "But every time I get close, people start dying. That's why I had to stay dead. It was the only way to investigate without putting more lives at risk." Then why contact me now? Marcus's expression grew even more serious. Because someone else knows you're alive, Sarah. Someone who's been using your survival to set a trap for the rest of our team. As if summoned by his words, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors began to echo through the valley around them. Sarah looked up to see two military helicopters approaching rapidly, flying in attack formation. That's not backup, Marcus said grimly, pulling out his sidearm. That's the cleanup crew. Someone wants both of us dead, and they want it to look like a terrorist operation. Sarah's mind raced as she processed this new information. If Marcus was telling the truth, then she had been manipulated from the very beginning. Hawk's approach at the shooting range, the intelligence about Marcus, being a double agent, the photographs from Istanbul. It could all have been an elaborate deception designed to draw her out of hiding and eliminate both her and Marcus before they could expose the real mole. But there was no time to analyze the situation further. The helicopters were almost overhead, and Sarah could see armed soldiers preparing to rappel down into the building complex. She and Marcus were about to be caught in what would undoubtedly be described as a tragic friendly fire incident. "This way," Marcus shouted, leading her toward one of the escape routes she had identified during her reconnaissance. "We need to reach the vehicles before they can establish a perimeter." As they ran through the abandoned buildings, dodging automatic weapons fire from the helicopters above, Sarah realized that her quiet life in Colorado was now definitely over. Whether Marcus was telling the truth or not, someone wanted both of them dead badly enough to risk a major military operation on American soil. "The drainage tunnel," Marcus shouted over the noise of the helicopters. "About 50 meters ahead, it connects to the old mining system." Sarah knew the tunnel he was talking about. She had identified it during her reconnaissance as a potential escape route. But using it would mean going underground with a man who might be a traitor, in a confined space where she would have limited options if he tried to kill her. The decision was made for her when a sniper's bullet shattered the concrete wall inches from her head. Whatever Marcus's true loyalties were, staying above ground meant certain death. Sarah followed him into the narrow drainage tunnel just as soldiers began rappelling from the helicopters behind them. The tunnel was pitch black and barely wide, enough for them to move single file. Sarah kept her weapon ready as they crawled through the confined space, her military training making her hyper-aware of how vulnerable she was to attack from behind. But Marcus seemed focused only on getting them both to safety, calling out warnings about obstacles and changes in the tunnel's direction. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, they emerged from the tunnel system into a natural cave that opened onto a hillside several miles from the abandoned building complex. From their elevated position, they could see the helicopters circling the area they had just escaped from, searching for any signs of survivors. "We need to keep moving," Marcus said, checking his watch. "They'll expand their search perimeter soon." "Not until you explain what's really going on," Sarah replied, training her weapon on him. "If you're innocent like you claim, then prove it." Marcus slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out a waterproof document case. Inside were photographs, communication intercepts, and financial records that painted a very different picture than the intelligence Hawk had shown her. "Commander Michael Harrison," Marcus said, pointing to a photograph of Hawk in military dress, uniform. 25 years in the SEALs, exemplary service record, and a massive gambling debt that made him vulnerable to recruitment by hostile intelligence services. Sarah stared at the documents in disbelief. The financial records showed regular payments into offshore accounts linked to Hawk, payments that corresponded with dates when classified intelligence had been leaked to terrorist networks. The communication intercepts showed coded messages between Hawk and known enemy operatives, using language patterns that matched the intelligence leaks her unit had been experiencing. "He's been the mole all along," Marcus continued, using his position to access classified information from multiple units, not just ours. "The convoy attack was arranged because our unit was getting close to identifying the source of the intelligence leaks." "Then why did he approach me in Colorado?" Sarah asked, her mind reeling from the implications. "Because your survival was a threat to his operation," Marcus explained. "As long as you were presumed dead, you couldn't testify about what you had observed before the convoy attack. But once you resurfaced, you became a potential witness who could connect him to the intelligence leaks. Sarah remembered the conversation she had overheard between Hawk and another officer just days before the convoy attack. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it, but now she realized they had been discussing operational security protocols and expressing concern about potential intelligence compromises. So he manipulated me into helping him eliminate you, Sarah said slowly. He convinced me that you were the traitor, then used me to draw you out of hiding. And now he's trying to eliminate both of us, Marcus replied. 2 soldiers who officially died 3 years ago, killed again in what will look like a terrorist operation. No one will ask questions and no one will investigate further. The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted their conversation. Through the cave opening, Sarah could see military trucks moving along the access roads below them, establishing a wider search perimeter. Their window for escape was closing rapidly. My teammates, Sarah said suddenly. Rodriguez, Chen, and Park. If Hawk is the real mole, then the mission they're preparing for tonight is definitely a trap, Marcus finished. He's probably planning to eliminate them at the same time he eliminates us. Clean sweep, no witnesses, no one left who might remember inconsistencies in his story. Sarah felt a surge of anger that she hadn't experienced since her military days. The idea that Hawk had been manipulating her teammates using their trust and loyalty to set them up for death was almost unbearable. We have to warn them, she said. We will, Marcus replied. But first we need to survive the next few hours. Hawk has significant resources at his disposal, and he's desperate enough to risk a major operation to silence us. They spent the next several hours moving through the mountainous terrain, using skills developed during years of covert operations to stay ahead of their pursuers. Marcus proved to be exactly the ally Sarah remembered from their military service. Competent, reliable, and completely focused on mission success. As night fell, they reached a position overlooking the terrorist training camp where Sarah's teammates were supposed to conduct their mission. But instead of the expected terrorist stronghold, they found something much more sinister. A carefully prepared ambush site with American military equipment positioned to create devastating crossfire patterns. The final confrontation began at 2100 hours when Sarah's former teammates arrived at what they believed was a terrorist training camp. From their concealed position on the hillside above, Sarah and Marcus watched through high-powered scopes as Rodriguez, Chen, and Park approached, the target building using standard tactical formations. They have no idea they're walking into a trap, Marcus whispered into his radio headset. Multiple friendly positions established around the perimeter, all with clear fields of fire on the approach routes. Sarah was using an encrypted communication device that Marcus had provided to try to contact her teammates directly, but their radios were either turned off or being jammed. The 3 soldiers below continued their approach, following what appeared to be solid intelligence about terrorist activities in the area. We have to stop them, Sarah said, starting to move down the hillside. Marcus grabbed her arm. If we reveal our position now, Hawk's people will eliminate all of us. We need a better plan. Sarah looked through her scope again and realized that Marcus was right. There were at least a dozen hidden positions surrounding the target area, all manned by what appeared to be American military personnel. Her teammates were walking into a carefully orchestrated ambush that would be impossible to survive through direct confrontation. What about creating a diversion, she suggested. If we can draw some of the ambush teams away from their positions, that might work, Marcus replied, studying the tactical situation through his own scope. But we'd need something big enough to make them think they were under attack by a larger force. Sarah smiled grimly and pulled out several items from her tactical pack. Items she had been carrying since her days as a covert operative. Remember those improvised explosive devices we used to make in Afghanistan? The ones designed to simulate mortar attacks? Marcus looked at the materials she was displaying and grinned. You still carry that stuff? Old habits, Sarah replied, already beginning to assemble the devices. Give me 10 minutes and I can create enough noise and flash to make it look like we have a full artillery battery up here. While Sarah worked on the explosives, Marcus used his communication equipment to record Hawk's voice patterns from intercepted, radio transmissions. Using voice modulation software, he created false orders that would confuse the ambush teams and hopefully give their teammates a chance to escape. "Rodriguez, this is command," Marcus said into the radio, using Hawk's modified voice patterns. "We have incoming artillery from unknown positions. Abort mission immediately and withdraw to Rally Point Alpha." The response came back immediately from Rodriguez's radio. "Command, we're almost at the target. Request confirmation of abort order." Sarah finished assembling her improvised explosive devices and positioned them at strategic locations around the hillside. When detonated in sequence, they would create the impression of incoming mortar fire from multiple directions. "Rodriguez, this is confirmed abort," Marcus continued in Hawk's voice. "Hostile artillery has you targeted. Withdraw immediately or risk friendly fire casualties." Through her scope, Sarah could see her teammates hesitating, clearly confused by the conflicting information they were receiving. They had been briefed for a mission against a terrorist camp, but now their command was telling them to abort due to artillery threats that they couldn't see or hear. The decision was made for them when Sarah detonated her first explosive device. The flash and sound were exactly what she had intended, a perfect simulation of incoming mortar fire that would be impossible to ignore. "Incoming!" Rodriguez shouted over the radio, and Sarah watched as her 3 teammates immediately took cover and began executing withdrawal procedures. But Hawk's ambush teams weren't fooled as easily as Sarah had hoped. Instead of retreating in confusion, they began moving to intercept her teammates' withdrawal route. The situation was rapidly evolving from a planned ambush into a running firefight with her friends caught in the middle. "We have to intervene, directly," Sarah told Marcus, chambering around in her sniper rifle. "They're going to get pinned down." Marcus nodded and began targeting the ambush positions with his own weapon. "Take the high-value targets first. Anyone with communication equipment or heavy weapons." The next 20 minutes were a deadly game of precision shooting and tactical movement. Sarah and Marcus used their elevated position to engage Hawk's forces, while their teammates fought their way out of the trap below. Sarah's training as a sniper served her well. Each shot was carefully placed to eliminate threats while avoiding any risk of hitting her own people. But the real shock came when Commander Hawk himself appeared on the battlefield, leading a team of soldiers in an attempt to flank Sarah and Marcus's position. "There," Marcus pointed to a group of figures moving up the hillside toward them. "Hawk's making his play." Sarah adjusted her scope and confirmed the target. Through the crosshairs, she could see Hawk's face clearly for the first time since their meeting at the shooting range. But now, instead of the friendly smile he had worn in Colorado, his expression was cold and calculating, the look of a man who had been killing for money for years. The final confrontation was brief but intense. Hawk's team had superior numbers and equipment, but Sarah and Marcus had the advantages of elevation and experience. More importantly, they were fighting to protect their friends and expose the truth, while Hawk was fighting only to protect his own secrets. When the shooting stopped, Hawk lay wounded but alive among the rocks below their position. His team had been eliminated or scattered, and Sarah's teammates were safe and moving toward their extraction point. "It's over," Marcus said, speaking into his communication device to contact legitimate military authorities who had been standing by to respond once they had proof of Hawk's treachery. But as Sarah looked down at the scene below, the evidence of betrayal, the bodies of soldiers who had died following illegal orders, the man who had manipulated her into nearly getting her friends killed, she realized that in some ways it was just beginning. The investigation that followed would reveal the full extent of Hawk's operation. For 3 years, he had been selling classified intelligence to terrorist networks, using his reputation and position to access information from multiple military units. The money had initially been intended to pay off gambling debts, but eventually became a lucrative second career that he couldn't give up. Sarah's official return from the dead created a media sensation, but she found that she no longer wanted the quiet, anonymous life she had built in Colorado. Working with Marcus and her surviving teammates, she helped establish a new intelligence unit focused on identifying and eliminating corruption within the military itself. 6 months later, Sarah stood again at a shooting range, not the civilian facility in Colorado where this had all began, but a military training facility where she was teaching advanced marksmanship to a new generation of soldiers. Her declared dead tattoo was now visible on her left shoulder, no longer a secret she had to hide, but a reminder of the price of betrayal and the value of loyalty. Rodriguez approached her as she finished her instruction session. "Any regrets? About coming back from the dead?" Sarah looked out at the young soldiers who were depending on people like her to keep them safe, and thought about the friends she had almost lost to Hawk's greed and manipulation. "No regrets," she replied. "Some secrets are too dangerous to keep buried." The tattoo on her shoulder bore the date of the convoy attack that was supposed to have killed her, but now it represented something different. Not the end of Sergeant Sarah Martinez, but the beginning of someone who understood that sometimes the dead have to return to protect the living.